Kia ora, everybody. My name's Sophie. I'm here from Community Waitakere. I'm just aware that we've got some really awesome speakers here tonight, and I want to make the most of their time here. So we're actually just going to kick it off on time. And the great thing about recording our kōrero tonight is it will be available for people in the future. Here's the lovely Penny Hulse. Penny, I'm just going to keep you on mute. Welcome though, great to have you here. Yeah, we've got some amazing people talking tonight. So I'm just gonna pass it over to the wonderful Matua Fred Astle, who is going to start us off with a Karekare before we get things underway. So kia koe Matua.
Ai tēnā koe. Hoi anō rā, ka inoi tātou. He honore e korore ki te atua, he ngā ronga ki te whenua e whakaaro pai ki ngā tāngata katoa. E te atua ka harawa whakawhitai anō ki a mō te tainga mai o mātou nei i raro i te korowai aroha hara a te korowai o taranga Māori ki a mātou a koa ko wai, a koa no whea. Nō reire e te atua e tukuna nei mātou tēnei hui ngatahi, tēnei wāna ngatahi, tēnei whakawhiti kōrero ki a koe tēnei pō ko koe tamata kai whakora moakatono atu. Āmine.
Āmine. Kia ora, Fred, and great to have you here. You'll be hearing more from Fred a little bit later on. Now, first of all, I wanted to thank everyone who's actually made it here for giving up one of your evenings during this crazy, silly season. But I'm sure you're going to really enjoy this. And there have been already a number of people who've said that they can't make it tonight and want to see the video. So it's pretty exciting that there's interest in the project. So the project is about a journalism project called Brave New World. And it certainly has been a very unusual and challenging couple of years. We're all well aware of the phrase, the new normal. However, COVID and the global pandemic has also been a huge opportunity to learn from our experiences, to innovate and to change things for the better. And where do we need to look for solutions? To our flax roots, to our communities, and to the people who collaborate. And we know that West Auckland has a rich history of grassroots, green, creative, and collaborative responses to the challenge of everyday life. And the response to COVID-19 has certainly been no different. So Community Waitakere, generously funded by the trusts, wanted to showcase some of these new ideas and document some of the stories that came out of our community's responses to COVID-19, in the hope that they could then inspire other regions around the motu and maybe even around the world, you never know. So this is how we came up with the idea for Brave New World. And I am going to share my screen with you. I've got a wee prezzo. Let me 1 sec. Sorry. Here we go. So the project, as I mentioned, is called Brave New World, and it's stories of West Auckland, stories of COVID community. The project will tell the stories of community groups and individuals doing critical work in the fight against COVID-19 and the challenges it's brought for the people of West Auckland. And it will also shine a light on community-led solutions and share some of the great ideas born out of West Auckland. And we are going to try and find some solutions to create an exciting and beautiful, brave new world. Thank you again to everyone who's made it tonight. Thank you to our amazing panelists who've given up their Tuesday evening and the week before Christmas, which is pretty insane of them and very lovely. I want to acknowledge the trusts for funding the project, generous board members of Community Waitakere, including Charlie, who helped with editing, Paul Janman from Public Films, and Ruben Gilchrist, who is a graphic design student from Waikato, and he did his first paid job for us and illustrated these cute little icons and did our logo. So Brave New World was filmed in January 2021, and we had 4 kaupapa. So one is around food for thought, looking at the local food system. And tonight we'll be having Cathy Livermore, who will speak about Kai sovereignty later on, and also Megan Beard, who is one of the key members of Kai West, as well as a systems innovator. So we've got some fascinating people to talk about that. The second story was around Karekare, the community out west. They're a local community that's building resilience and community in the face of their isolation and various challenges. And we'll hear from Karel, who is a local and has been a local for many years out there. The third story was about by Māori for Māori solutions. So we'll be talking to Fred Astle, who's involved in the Māori Thought Leadership Rōpu. We've also been joined by Vicky Ham, who formed that rōpu. And Fred's also going to talk to us a little bit about his role as the Pou Whakarae, or the head of Māori development at Vision West, and how he's worked to create Māori leadership and embed kaupapa Māori strategies in what is a mainstream organisation. So that will be really interesting. And the final story was around collaboration and West Auckland Together. So West Auckland Together was a group that emerged as a response to the 2020 lockdown, but was an iteration of an earlier collaborative network, which was called the Community Marketplace. And it's made up of a number of organisations: Sports Waitakere, Healthy Families, Vision West, local environment and community organisations, including Community Waitakere, Eco Matters, Massey Matters, a whole lot of people coming together. And the West is known for its collaboration. So that's something we'll be talking about tonight. How can we, or what lessons can be learned from the West in terms of how they collaborate? What things do we need to let go of in order to work together better? And I just wanted to acknowledge that there are so many stories that we could have told. I've got a bunch of them up here, but looking into the West Auckland digital divide, we had Lynn from the New Zealand Bird Rescue Charitable Trust, who had higher than usual bird admissions and setting up a new baby bird nursery, all while COVID was going on. A local playwright who wrote about his grandmother on the other side of the world and her experience and how they connected more, which allowed us to reflect on, whānau and isolation and aging and COVID. And a whole lot of other initiatives, including the WISE Collective, which is made up of former refugee and migrant women who got together through Zoom and did activities like upcycling workshops to make masks in recyclable bags, or reusable bags, sorry, and then they were given out to refugee families. And another really cool initiative was what's happening out at the New Windsor Community Hub, which is a reasonably new community facility. And during lockdown, they were a group of street connectors sent out these little flyers and put them in every single house in New Windsor, and they've been really building up their community resilience and community networks as a result of that. And this work was actually done by Karel, who's speaking tonight, his daughter Shalima, who works for Community Waitakere as well. So we're keeping it very kind of local over here. I would like to introduce our panelists. As I said, we've got some amazing speakers. So up the top is Karel, and he is a Karekare local, and he's involved in pretty much everything you could be, a stalwart of community development, as well as a teacher and photographer. We've got the wonderful Matua Fred Astle, who's from Tainui. As I said before, he's the Pou Whakarae, or the head of Māori development. He's also an honorary academic at the School of Medicine and the director of Kaupapa Māori at the Surgical and Translational Research Centre. And he's been very involved in Māori education and Māori health, and a consultant for many years. We've got the wonderful Megan Beard, who's a systems innovator at Healthy Families Waitakere, passionate about the food system, passionate about innovating, and she's certainly got some ideas for some solutions around how to fix the food system. We're also going to be joined by Cathy Livermore from Waitaha, Katimamoi and Kaitahu, and she's a Māori systems innovator at Healthy Families Waitakere, as well as a dancer, artist, educator, etc., very talented. And very stoked to have the lovely Penny Hulse, who I'm sure you'll all know as the former Deputy Mayor at both Waitakere City Council and Auckland Council. She was also the former Chair of Auckland Council's Environment and Community Committee, and also on the board of Kāinga Ora. And we also have a last minute amazing addition of Vicky Ham, Ngāti Tūwharetua and Ngai Te Aho, who is the Māori Strategic Lead for Housing First, and she was formerly the Māori Systems Innovator at Healthy Families. So she's the Cathy took over from her when she moved on. So without further ado, I am going to crack in because we've got heaps of stuff that are going to be covered tonight, and we're going to start off with a little video that was made about Karekare. So I'm going to play you the video, and then at the end we'll have a couple of questions from Karel. I'm going to ask him a couple of things. Just a reminder that if you do have any questions that you want to ask or anything in the chat, please just use that. We're going to have a question and answer session at the end. So if there's anything that you want to know about, stick it in the question and answers, and we'll make sure that we cover that at the end. And we're really keen to hear your feedback. So without further ado, I'm going to play you one of our videos, our little short documentaries.
Karekare has a population of just under 300 people and is an isolated community on the west coast of Auckland.
When I first moved out here, we didn't have electricity, and it was a very small community, and we tended to work together a lot, depend on each other a lot. We fundraised to build the school. We formed the fire brigade, and many of us were involved in surf lifesaving. So there was a real sense of community and of working together. And it's the fact that we're an isolated small community that means we depend on each other. It was after that weather event in 2018, Civil Defence came out about several days after the actual event. We realised we needed to be able to check on people much more rapidly. You know, we have people with windows blown and roofs off. You know, we needed to be able to get help to people much more rapidly, and we felt that the best way to do this was to split the area up into small chunks, which one or two people could easily check on everybody and then report in what the needs of people were. We had a fire where a house burnt down up the road, and our community checker had woken all the neighbours up and alerted them to the fire before the fire brigade got there. And that was an example of the system working.
I guess COVID really accelerated our work, and it actually picked up gaps. Like we had drafted a resilience plan, but we didn't have a pandemic section. So that was one thing we quickly did. Karekare is an amazing community anyway. The work that the resilience group doing is just building on what happens already, but making sure that nobody's left out, and ensuring that information gets to Auckland Emergency Management, and then having systems to distribute resources. So it's kind of building on what's already there, not trying to supplant it.
You know, community is really important to me. Some really smart person said that when you die, what you leave behind is what you do for others. And yeah, it's not a bad way to live your life.
So that's our first video. Now I'm going to get Karel on here so you can have a chat to them. We can have a chat to the man himself. Where are you, mate? There you are. Thanks for joining us.
Kia mihi kia koutou.
Kia ora.
Koutou katoa.
Kia ora, Karel. So, hearing a little bit about what's been going on in Karekare, sounds like you guys were pretty busy during the lockdown. But you also implemented a number of initiatives that helped to build community. So can you talk maybe a little bit about some of those, the picnics, the sports gear, the Easter tree, some of those initiatives?
Okay, so as mentioned before on that video, the roots of our response during COVID were back in the work we were already doing. And so once COVID hit, we tried to identify the people in the community who are more vulnerable, who might need assistance. And we identified these and contacted these people so we could be a backstop for them. So we could help them doing things like get food from the supermarket and provide other support like stuff from a chemist and so on. And then
how did you actually go about doing that, Karel? Like, did you send them out flyers? Hello,
we
Cathy. I'm just going to turn you off.
already set up the our people for each area, each of the 7 areas, which are sort of small enough areas for the volunteers in charge of those areas to know the people and to visit them. And that was the idea behind that, splitting it up into small chunks. Even though Karekare itself was small, we wanted even smaller groups so that people could know who their contact was. And then because COVID is a potentially scary time, especially at the beginning there for children, some activities were organised for the local children. Shalima organised for children to draw and make Easter eggs because it was around Easter time, and these were hung on a Whakarae tree down by near the beach. A resident built some soccer goal posts, and we put them in the glade, which is a flat area adjacent to the road, again near the beach. And a volleyball net was set up and so on. So the local kids could get together and play outside, so it's safer in the COVID sort of world, but still have some contact with each other. And there were weekly distanced gatherings and picnics in the glade to keep up community morale. Yeah.
That sounds lovely. And Shalima was also mentioning in the documentary about the resilience plan. So do you want to talk a little bit about where you're at with that? And I'll just find a link for it while you're talking and put it in the chat so everyone can check out the amazing work that you've been doing with that, Karel. But maybe you could, say a little bit about sort of.
Okay, back in the days of Waitakere City under Mayor Bob Harvey and the wonderful Penny Hulse, we had a West, in Waitakere City, we had our own civil defence set up, and I was the civil defence coordinator for out at Karekare. But once the super city came along, that sort of fell by the way. And so after there were some weather events around 2014, and again a big weather event in 2018, and with the help of the community board, the Karekare community worked with PR to start putting together some information for people who've moved out from town who perhaps don't know some of the obvious things about how to be resilient, things like a tap on the bottom of your water tank so that if there's no power, you can get water, flushing your toilet with a bucket of water rather than, stressing about that. And so we'd started that work and we were helped by the community board, but with...
well, it looks like under COVID, Shalima really took that head on and kind of finished it off, hey?
Yeah, the thing is with those things, you can keep editing them forever, but under COVID, we decided it was important to get it sewn up. And so Shalima took on the job of doing the final edit and getting it to the to this stage of a nice.
Oh, looks lovely.
Which was produced with the help of the community board, and that's got sections on things like first, the overall description of the resilience teams for each little subgroup, the overall management group, so that we're resilient. If people are away from the area, there's other people to step in and take their place, and the system still works. About communication during emergencies, things like during COVID, we got laminated posters put up in each of those 7 areas so that people could, see information about what was going on. And even if, there was no power or no cell phone. And there's sections on flooding, other natural hazards, severe weather, fire, power outages, and so on. And
a new pandemic section.
and a new pandemic epidemic section.
That's amazing work, Karel. That's
we've got that booklet, and as you say, there should.
I've put a link to that if anyone would like to have a look at that. So Karel's going to stay on because I'd like to ask you another question, but perhaps I can ask you that at the end. But maybe you can think about if you think that there are some changes that could be made to support communities to be more connected and self-sufficient. If you can have a think about that, and I'll ask you that at the end because I'm sure you've got some thoughts on that. Thank you so much. Well, I can see in the chat that someone has said that you are a living legend. So he's a bit of a hero, that man. All right, now let's move on to our next kaupapa, which is, let me have a little looky here. It's quite a lot of work involved in this sort of screen wrangling system. Okay, I think the next one is about the Māori Thought Leadership Rōpu. Yeah. So this was our third story, reducing inequality by Māori for Māori. And as I said, so when COVID-19 first reached our shores, it highlighted the deep inequity in our society, which is entrenched by colonisation and systemic racism that we see play out across the country. And in West Auckland, we have a very active and innovative group of Māori leaders who sprang into action in order to ensure that the response for Māori was a by Māori for Māori approach. And Vicky Ham, who we've got, who's joining us tonight, she's the former Māori Systems Innovator at Sports Waitakere. Through that role, she provided a Zoom platform for Māori leaders, chief executives, and frontline staff across both Māori and mainstream organisations to come together collectively to support the nearly 35,000 Māori who live in West Auckland. So I'm going to show you another little video. I'm sorry about the volume. I don't know if I can make it any louder because we're maxed out, but I've put the old subtitles on, so hopefully that helps.
So what we did was that we turned the church auditorium into a food bank warehouse. But then what we had to do was figure out how we actually get the food out versus whānau no longer able to come in, the public weren't able to come in. And to make sure that the most vulnerable cohort of whānau were at the top of the list. So we did that, plus we looked at who are the others that are in our surrounding West Auckland communities that we need to get to at the jump. So one of those was the marae kura kaupapa.
A lot of our Māori whānau were frontline workers or essential workers. We are collective people, and of course we live, closely together. And so, those essential workers had to be really cautious and careful. It was an opportunity to invite services throughout West Auckland who had an interest in supporting our Māori communities to actually come together to share what they were doing, in response to supporting our whānau through COVID. what are the opportunities or gaps that we might see in a system that may not be working for our Māori communities or whānau. As a collective, what we came up with was kai sovereignty, rangatahi. What does that look like in terms of supporting our rangatahi out here in West Auckland, given that it's a young population out here? Community economic development, Māori leadership. So what does that look like in terms of our rangatahi leadership? What does that look like in terms of our current leadership?
I had to consider what our Māori crisis framework might look like. How do we provide tikanga support within level 4? So all those things I'm asking are questions that probably a lot of people probably don't get to ask themselves, but I was able to use a little bit of time that I had, do a little bit more research in crisis leadership, and then look at what that might look like in a Māori environment. So I came up with a framework called Whitu Pairanga. And so Whitu Pairanga was based on 4 stars. So I used a navigation thing to help me, because we were going into a journey that was new for us. So we had to follow some guiding stars. Now what we've got to do is we've got to navigate our way through the impacts of COVID. Loss of jobs, loss of incomes, disconnection, increased anxieties amongst the immediate whānau. What does the anxieties look like if you're a child, a young person, single mum, or just an adult, or an elderly person? So
what does that look like in terms of kura kaupapa Māori, our marae and leadership? How do we as a collective support our leaders to continue to do what they do well? Also, we have a collective of marae out here. We've got our 2 main marae out here in West Auckland, but we also have marae within schools. So how do we support our marae even more so to become cultural hubs? It doesn't matter what kaupapa might be driven out of that marae, but it's the context in which it's delivered. So funding opportunities is a big one at the moment, to look at funding options to support those 5 po or those 5 kaupapa that I spoke about, but also individually as organisations, what can they sort of apply for to support what we already know around the needs and wants as a way forward to support our whānau through, the second wave of COVID and the third wave and so on and so on and so on.
I'm appreciating the fact that what COVID has done is brought the Māori community together. Yeah, we all have our individual roles to play, but really we're better at this if we do it together.
Let me just pause that vid. Yeah, the Māori Thought Leadership Rōpu is an amazing initiative that really should be in every area around the country. And so I'm really, really amazed at the work that that group has done. So I have asked Fred to talk to us a little bit. I just want to firstly acknowledge Vicky, who's here, but Vicky will chat to you in the panel discussion. So if anyone's got any questions about that Māori leadership rōpu or how it can be facilitated or anything like that, just think on those and we can answer your questions about that. But Fred, I'm going to pass it over to you, and I believe you're going to talk to us a little bit about Vision West and the work that you guys have been doing kind of in terms of the Māori leadership and strategy. So I'll just hand it over to you to take it away. Sorry, my cat's come to say hi.
Yeah, kia ora, thank you. And thanks for having me along. Also, just want to acknowledge also Karel as well, with your mahi there, and Karekare Karel. Yeah, I guess the Vision West story is a very intriguing one for me. it started back in 2016 really, and I came on really just to help set up their whānau centre. Well, then, long story short, that then culminated into me becoming the first Māori executive. And it was a role that I was accustomed to previously. So, you know, it wasn't my first time at the rodeo being a Māori executive, even in a mainstream organisation. But the difference here was that I knew that I had to just look at who are these folks? Who is Vision West? What are they about? And once I understood that, then I was able to apply myself accordingly. And on that, at the moment, we have a Māori leadership team. I set up, it took me several years, but we finally got there. So I set up Kuia Mai, which is really like our Māori reference point, if you want to call it a Māori department. But we don't use the word department very much. But it is a reference point. Basically, I have two general managers, Māori general managers, one who is a national Māori development manager, and the other is a general manager, or Pauariki, they're called, is a general manager for our Hui and Mai whānau services. And these are all capable Māori informed services. So one of the things that I had to try and understand quickly was what drives this organization, you know, and I'm excited about the different contexts, service contexts, because it gave me a really good insight. So for example, we have home health care, housing, we also have community services, social services, we have our Hui and Mai whānau services, our education training centre, which also includes our early childhood centre, right up to our PTE. And we've just appointed a tumawaki for that, a principal, to bring academic leadership into that. And so I have that person and two other GMs reporting to me.
Sorry, Fred, I was just actually going to say, for those people who don't know about Vision West, because it's a huge organisation, can you just for an example of scale, talk about how many people work there? Because it's a massive organisation, hey?
Yeah, we have over 1,700 staff. 1,700 staff. So that gives you the kind of scale even of systems that we need to actually run the back office. The business support is what we call them. You can't grow what we need to grow without incredible systems. It's virtually impossible. So as we're raising the standards in our delivery of care, we also need to make sure that we've got the systems behind the engine, or behind it all, as part of the engine room. And so they are very much a part of what we do. So even today, I was just looking at signing off new technologies to help us become more effective in our work, so that we're working cohesively. So as I said, we're growing, but right now it is about how we do what we would call our business as usual in a COVID environment now. And I think we've taken some lessons from last year, which is when I launched and developed and launched Whiti Pairangi. But now we're now having to see Whiti Pairangi in the landscape of the Delta virus and the need for vaccinations, keeping our people safe and so forth, and also the vaccination mandates. So we're having to navigate our way. So I guess if you can put it this way, my job is to provide Māori expertise around road mapping these developments and bridging. So that's my role. It's highly strategic. I very rarely be involved in in operations as much as I used to have, as I was previously, but that is the role of an executive, is to ensure that you have a strategic roadmap and a really good plan that you can actually bring everybody else on board with.
And Fred, you've told me that about the importance of data and how up to date Vision West is with data. What were some of the issues around kind of gathering key data, or how did you go about doing that to better understand, what the needs were, I guess?
Yeah, that just came down to our IT team working with us, our quality evaluation team working with us, so that we were able to know exactly what kind of data we wanted to extrapolate and collate, and and the kind of analysis, keeping an eye on the trends of that data, and making sure that not everyone is data savvy, but just making sure that we can actually have the data that we want to see, and understand the stories behind, the qualitative stories behind the quantitative numbers. So yeah, without getting too much into the detail, that's pretty much it. So, but we're also looking at what kind of investment we need to make in that data collection too. So yeah.
And so when you think about kind of, because I mean, some of the work that Fred has also been involved with is setting up Kaupapa Māori Trauma-Informed Care Service. Is that the right kind of title for that organisation? So you looked at data. Yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we've set up 3 services. The first one that we set up was the Whānau Centre, which is our Kaupapa Māori triage, Kaupapa Māori based triage, and so that's still operating now, and it can operate become a triage for several projects all at once. Then we have what you were referring to. We call it Mātango Oranga, which is really specialised care. It is our Kaupapa Māori trauma-informed care, and so we get referrals from Oranga Tamariki, from MSD, from housing, our own housing service, and also we're looking at another specialist to join our team, and that's also very strongly Kaupapa Māori based. And then our third service is Paiarunui, which is our Te Puni Kokiri funded Māori youth employment, but it's really about having to address the barriers that stop Māori young people from learning and from developing. So we've got basically 3 teams in play. Yeah, and so they all report to our Huia Mai Whānau Services GM.
So out of COVID-19 and all the work that has been done kind of around the country, is there anything that you've noticed that's been really positive in terms of supporting Māori leadership and Māori initiatives that kind of needs to become the norm? Like what's been done well, you think, or what are some of the initiatives that you've seen or been a part of through this crazy COVID time that should continue and need more funding?
I guess the thing that we're doing at the moment is that we're working with TPK on Te Puni Kokiri on our Māori vaccinations as well, more so from the Māori Health Promotion, and also working closely with the whānau Waipareta, who are registered to facilitate the vaccinations. And on top of that, we're also working with Ministry of Education, and that means working with 220 young people, or even older learners, many Māori learners that are impacted by COVID and want to re-engage in learning. So they could be at young learners, or they could be adult learners as well. So then there's the next one, which the government has already announced, which is the community care support. So that's still to be finalised. So I think for us, what we have done is that we've proven that we know how to deliver services by Māori for Māori, even within a mainstream context. And so that's why if you understand the kind of standards you want to set, then the confidence from government is pretty much there. And also just from the other private and public sector too.
Amazing work, Fred. Thanks so much for all the work that you do. I'm just aware of time, and I know that we've got, we'll come back to this kaupapa, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the panel. It's going to get, things are about to get pretty crazy. You guys, are you ready? There's a lot of people here. Remember, if you've got any questions, to please send them through while I try and unmute everyone. Megan, I can't unmute you, but I guess you can do that. Where's Penny? Ask to unmute. And Vicky. Wow. Okay, welcome everybody. I would love to go around and do a wee round about you, but I've done your intros for you in the interest of saving time, but I just want you to know that that's would have been my preference to go around and get you to all introduce yourself. So we're gonna talk about a few questions, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to address some questions at specific people, and then it's kind of like if you want to chip in, then go for it, because I think there could be some interesting conversations. But I'm mainly interested in kind of, as this project's around the Brave New World, like thinking about what things need to change with current systems and what are some of the kind of more innovative or interesting things that you've come across and how we can make more of that happen. So we're going to start talking about kai. So the episode around kai was called Food for Thought. And I guess we'll start off maybe with you, Megan. If you can just give us a little bit of a context around kind of what changes were made in the food landscape during COVID with respect to food, and some of the ways forward that you can see. Just a couple of small cues, for you.
Sure. Well, so yeah, last year, of course, when COVID came around, I think most people, well, first of all, you were shrunk back into your house. So you're sitting there in front of a screen. And a lot of the work that we're in, right, is with community development, and Kai West kind of intersects community development with food initiatives. So there was a bunch of community developers who were stuck indoors and really wanted to do something. And so you see this first response was like real, like, I want to help. And so that's why we saw in the food relief landscape a lot of new players come in, because they wanted to immediately help the people they knew in the communities they know really well. And so for us, Kai West, we didn't want to do that, but we wanted to be able to link information to as many people as we could. And because our network was a bunch of really well-connected community developers, they, you know, the web was spread far. So we coordinated that kind of information, sort of centralization of information that was key to West Aucklanders. In terms of food, where to get it, the rules around things, and then it sort of started to spread into other aspects of people's lives. So food relief was probably, for us in the food system, was the part that got a lot of attention, it got a lot of funding, and it really showed up for us and for everyone here probably, the lack of local food resilience or food, and some of it was you couldn't control. So pātakas had to close down, people couldn't go to their community gardens, so small scale growers couldn't actually grow anything, or even anything that they had, they were shut out of the market because everything went into the duopoly, the supermarkets. So and so the emergency response is just throw money at getting parcels to people, and that has continued, of course, through lockdown this year, with very little change, to be honest.
I know, Megan, that one of the things that you and I have talked about previously is about these role of these kind of social connectors, like the people that have a lot of social capital. Do you want to maybe just talk a little bit about that, because that's quite an interesting aspect of the food system, I think.
Yeah. So when we did the Free Food Forum last year, we gathered everyone from the food relief system together, and what became really apparent was that the system relies on all of these the social capital of these connectors that we have that are really grassroots, often working out of the back of their cars with food that they've just gotten from contacts in their community, and they're doing a lot of hard work. And then there's the bigger organizations who have the infrastructure and the space and the staff to sort of centralize more, and that actually happened with the formation of those national and regional networks. So the Aotearoa Food Rescue Network, the Food Network, Kuri Kai. So that there was a response to that, but still there are still these people who are volunteering their time. And luckily last year, the lockdowns were relatively, we didn't think so at the time, that was relatively short in length. So people didn't get burnt out. But this year, these people, and there's a lot more of them now in the landscape, because this lockdown has gone on and on and on. And the demand has increased and people are worn out. And what we've seen is these social connectors, the part of the population that are more active in the volunteer sector, which are older people and women, and they're getting burnt out. So food relief really relies on that really firm foundation that we have in West Auckland and many parts of anywhere really, of those people, those connectors that are doing it for the love of it.
Yeah,
and so the resource is not there for them.
It would be great if you can have a think about, at the end, I'm going to ask you all about a solution that you'd like to see implemented, or some kind of bullet points about things that could be improved. But just in the interest of time, we might just introduce Cathy, and no mai hara mai Cathy. If you, and maybe Vicky might like to chip in, or feel free, anyone else, but to talk a little bit about the Kai sovereignty kaupapa that you've been working on, which kind of counters some of the stuff that Megan's talking about in terms of developing a resiliency around food.
Kia ora nā koutou. I will invite Vicky, I'd love for you to introduce, because you are the one who really championed this kaupapa to start with. So do you want to share sort of what has happened, and then I'll take it forward?
Ka pai. Ngā mihi kia koutou katoa, pai ki te kitia kia koutou, kia ora tātou. Ko Vicky Ham tōku ingoa, he uria hung no Ngāti Tūwhare tō me kahungunu hoki. Ngā mihi kia koutou. Hey, look, it's so good to be here, and thank you, Sophie, for your invitation. And that video that we just saw around the Māori Thought Leadership Collective, I thought, wow, that was quite a long time ago when you really think about it, because so much has happened. And so the Kai sovereignty kaupapa came out of the Māori Thought Leadership Collective. And so the Kai sovereignty kaupapa was one of 6 focus areas that the collective were looking at in terms of supporting whānau through the impacts of COVID. And so Kai was, of course, really a no-brainer in terms of supporting our whānau through, growing their own Kai. It was also a cost-saving way of actually being able to afford Kai as well, but it had a real tikanga Māori worldview perspective to it. But there's actually more that I can share, but for this particular kaupapa, Kai sovereignty was one of those focus areas that the Thought Leadership Collective came up with. And just to say that, the Thought Leadership Collective actually evolved out of a community of practice, or just a network of services that came together to look at, well, how can we work smarter to support our whānau through the impacts of COVID. But then there was an opportunity to look at, well, how can we take a more of a collective impact approach to support our whānau? And that's the point of difference around the Thought Leadership Collective. So I'll hand this time back over to Cathy, because I know our time is short, and Cathy can talk a little bit more about the Kai Sovereignty kaupapa.
Oh, kia ora, Vicky. Thanks heaps. Tēnei te mihi nui ki tēnei pōnei ki ngā koutou. He uri a hau ko Waitaha me Kati Mamoi me kai tahu oku iwi, ko Cathy Livermore tōku ingoa. And I'm a Māori Systems Innovator at Healthy Families Waitakere. And so, yeah, I've been very blessed to inherit this kaupapa from Deb Raroa and from Vicky, who have been, again, championing it, and Megan as well has been involved, and Rea. And so, yeah, where to from here? And receiving this kaupapa now, it's really the questions, the partai is, how do we strengthen these foundations? We've seen the challenges that have come up and been really highlighted through COVID. And so now we're sitting on, how do we grow a more secure future for Māori communities in accessing kai, healthy kai, good quality kai. And not just that, but looking at how we can also help whānau to develop their ideas and discover potential kai businesses so that we can better participate in the food economy and in creating opportunities, not just as consumers, but actually as, drivers in that food economy, both locally and in a wider regional sense. So I think, these sorts of solutions, what are we doing well now, and what do we need to do better, and what opportunities haven't we seen yet that we can really start to invest some time and energy? And so at Healthy Families Waitakere, within this kaupapa, we're in partnership with Community Waitakere, with Hoani Waititi Marae, and with the wider Māori Thought Leadership Collective, which is a collective, but is also, it's Fred, it's at those at Vision West. And at Healthy Families, our sort of mandate is to come in alongside. So we're not there to deliver anything. We're there to come in alongside those who are out there doing the mahi. And again, to explore through that collaborative relationship, what opportunities there is for us to strengthen and support, and also grow opportunities. So some of the things is looking at education around traditional kai practices, and getting, again, strengthening our relationships and confidence to grow our own mara. And through that, to also look at our hauora and well-being, and how, we're actually supporting our health in other ways when we start to get our hands literally back in the whenua. That's a sort of really close to home sort of options that we're looking, but how we get there is really through gathering together as community. And so it's through our mātauranga, and sharing and growing through that, the maramataka, as well as our kai practices. And then another really important thing is really to be able to harness and articulate whānau voice to inform the kai sector of, the insights, the barriers, the opportunities specific to, Māori whānau here in West Auckland. And then increase and strengthen Māori participation and leadership in long-term solution planning. So that's urban farming, how all of these can then support us to improve Māori health, so that we're living and breathing and working and playing in strength, both within our tinana, but also in our relationship with the whenua here in West Auckland. So kai sovereignty it's huge. It's complex. It's on all levels of operations, from core government out to all our local boards and down to grassroots. It's down to whānau. It's down to those who are passionate and have those skills and intuitions with the whenua, and just gathering and raising that all up now so that we can start to shape the future both for us as communities, but also to be able to share with the wider West Auckland community.
Amazing, Cathy. That's so, yeah, that's really inspiring to hear about all that. And I also know I'd like to acknowledge like the work that Kai West has done, and that's also been Vicky and Megan and a number of you in terms of putting things like urban farms into all those local board plans through meeting with local board and lobbying. So that's something really exciting that's kind of now in the legislation. I'm just going to do a little 180 turn and ask about a slightly different topic now, but at the end, I think I'm just going to go around and hear from each of you one kind of key solution, or if you have anything else you want to add. So if you've got anything burning that you want to say, then please just keep it there for later. But one of the other kaupapa that we looked at in Brave New World was around kind of collaboration, working together, and how we kind of support leadership at these different levels, whether it be like local leadership in the case of Karekare, whether it be Māori leadership in mainstream or leadership in general of diverse communities. There's a really strong and active Pacifica community out west. So I thought maybe we could start with you, Penny, if you've got any thoughts on that. And then Karel, I'd be really interested to hear as well what you think could be done for communities to really help and assist at that community level to strengthen. So Penny, if we just start with you, and then of course I want to hear from Fred and all of you as well, but we'll just start with those two first.
Oh, kia ora, Sophie, and kia ora tēnā koe to everybody who is on the call, and special love and aroha to Karel. I feel we've known each other for a large part of our lives, Karel, and thank you for teaching my two sons to be good men. And that probably is a really good segue into leadership. You know, we out west, I think, have a really good tradition of good leadership, and just looking at who's in front of me on the screen, that tradition carries on. But we are, I think, in danger at the moment of just letting the threads unravel. So this whole spirit of collaboration and cooperation, I think, is critical. And part of it is the moving on time for the grey heads like me, and the handing over of the mantle to our new and up-and-coming leaders, particularly our young Māori leaders and our young Pacific leaders, and thinking about the opportunities that COVID has brought to the fore. It's been a really good opportunity for some of our younger people to step up and join in with Vision West, with some of our community initiatives on the ground, like at Karekare, and to learn from, you know, some of the experienced hands. To that end, though, I think we need to really start formalising leadership opportunities and thinking of the work that Timothy Lohman is doing with the Western Initiative, together with Whakarae, looking at young Māori and Pacific leadership and challenging organisations to grow their young Māori and Pacific leaders. I think that's where the West can really lead the way. And looking at some of our on-the-ground initiatives, that's where we ask ourselves our questions. I really loved, Cathy, your two key points, you know, learning to come alongside people and walking the walk with them, as well as harnessing that whānau voice. And I think that's where you start to look for those leadership opportunities.
So Penny,
So
in all your experience, what have you kind of seen that we need more of, or what's kind of coming up, or how can kind of mainstream, I mean, it's really within mainstream organisations, because if it's a Māori or Pacifica organisation, then they're pretty focused already on creating those leadership opportunities. So yep. I guess, yeah, what can be done, or what have you seen that's been done well in terms of creating those leadership opportunities in the mainstream space?
Still a huge gaps to be filled, but the West Auckland Together group is working on a tool to get organisations to look at their understanding of operating in a te tiriti environment and scoring themselves on just how far along the continuum they are to be working effectively with Māori, and then utilising every opportunity that they can to do training within organisations to you know, change the experience that our community have of working in a way that's more sensitive to te tiriti partnerships. So I think let's test our organisations and prepare organisations for working differently. And where people are feeling they're a little bit weak and things aren't working well, then let's ask for help and and make those changes. And I guess out west is a good safe place to challenge that and do that, Mahi.
Amazing, thanks, Penny. Karel, do you have any thoughts about and I'm also can see that you're on mute, so you're going to have to unmute yourself as well. Do you have any thoughts about how, for example, for the Karekare community, how can local government or other organisations better work with community to allow them to do already what they're doing so well? Like, is more resourcing required? Because a lot of that work is voluntary. In terms of all your resilience work, what would you like to see in terms of support around training or any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, we were helped a great deal by the local board working with both the Piha and Karekare community in terms of they set up meetings and provided dinner, say, for example, when we had a 3-hour meeting in an evening, and sort of help focus and draw people from the communities together. Now, that was one of the thrusts of our work in our resilience booklet was back in the old days, it was me being the civil defence coordinator, but now we've got a much broader leadership team so that it's not reliant on one person. If I'm away on holiday somewhere, there's plenty of people who know what needs to be done and are capable of doing it. And in some ways, we are fortunate in being a small, tight-knit community, and that does have some advantages. And that's why I guess we're a little further ahead than Piha is, just because we're a smaller community and it's easier to agree on things and get things complete rather than editing forever, for example.
You also mentioned to me specifically around some support that you used to get, maybe from civil defence. But it's maybe not in place anymore. Can you just talk a little bit about what used to happen?
Well, back under Waitakere City, we had a really strong link between the volunteer fire brigades and civil defence, and it wasn't just the fire brigades, but other people as well, but there was training provided in an Elcote house and so on. And when the super city was formed in Auckland Emergency Management, that local link to was somehow lost. And that was one of the things in 2018, which we realised as a community, was that if something big hits all of Auckland, or a significant part of Auckland, there's no cavalry coming over the hill to Karekare or Piha to look after us. We have to be resilient and look after ourselves. And that was a huge part of the impetus. And I really want to acknowledge the local board's help in facilitating this, but that's, it's that realization that you have to look after yourselves that, stirred us on to get to the stage where we're at now, and where we have a system in place which is not perfect, but it's a growing, developing thing, and I think we've got something really strong to build on.
Yeah, amazing work. Thanks, Karel. Fred, you've mentioned a lot about working in a mainstream organisation and your own journey with kind of creating these Māori leadership groups and how it has taken time. One question would be kind of how within an organisation, a mainstream organisation, how can leadership support Māori to have more of these leadership chances? And also, what does it mean, kind of a big question, but what does it mean or look like to be a good te tiriti partner now in 2021 going into 2022, what does that look like in terms of equity in the workplace and opportunities?
Yeah, I think you just said it right there, equity. It means then that there's an equal seat at the table, and the table is designed for everyone. But what COVID has reminded us again and again is that there are disparities for Māori and Pacifica. That's what, and so the role we play is how do we build resilience right from the get-go. And then once there is equity, then there is the question of, well, how do we invest in it? So how do we invest in equity? What are some of the things that we need to measure off? You see, and it looks different for everybody. But some of the context that I'm having to deal with is really around healthcare, social services, poverty, homelessness, family violence, loneliness, also mental health, and it's the feeling of being disconnected as well, age abuse. So what we have seen is that we understand there's disparities, but I would say that partnership is really well, then how do we actually co-lead this together? And the whole tokenism thing is that you basically aren't very sincere, and so that's why Vision West is considered as a treaty-centered organisation, because we worked hard from the governance level to the operational end as well, and we're committed to the one goal, and that is really the purpose of our mandate is to seeing lives transformed. And I want to end it off with this. If somebody were to ask me what is the essence of Māori leadership, and I was to say Māori transformational leadership, you see, you can combine all the skills of being strategic, traditional knowledge of what it means to be a good organic leader and strategic leader, and even a good manager. But the fact of the matter is, it has to be highly transformational. I think what Karel has done is reminded us that because Karel's transformational, the work he's done in the community, you see, and so that's pretty much is what I'm committed to. And I think the purpose of even seeing, I think we've got about 1,400 now registered for whānau to come and grab a Christmas hamper, 1,400. And so, but it's really just about their transformation and our part in their stories. So.
Amazing. Does anyone else want to share any whakaaro that they have? Otherwise, I'm pretty keen to also return to some of that kaupapa around food. But
yes.
Vicky, have you got any thoughts?
Yes,
yeah.
I do. So I just want to acknowledge everyone that have sort of spoken about leadership. Leadership for me is values-based leadership as well. Definitely transformational leadership. Now, one of the focus areas for the Māori Thought Leadership Collective was around a Māori COVID impact report. That report is something that I would encourage people to have a look at.
I'll put the link in.
Yep, which would be cool. So our focus, of course, was to interview and to kōrero and talk and ask questions to our rangatahi around what have the impacts of COVID been on them, what have they learnt, is there anything differently they would do. But one of the other questions we asked was, what areas do we need to get moving on at a local and national level to improve equity? So they came back and said, provide more opportunities for rangatahi to step into leadership roles. Support us to develop and grow into leadership roles. So, when we talk about leadership, well, what does that look like for our youth and rangatahi? How do we invest in our youth, even more so, to step into those leadership roles. So people like myself can step back. So I really wanted to first and foremost acknowledge the Māori Thought Leadership Collective and all those who have been part of that collective, where they have provided the opportunity for our rangatahi youth to actually step into those leadership roles. And now what does this look like now that we are having to live with COVID? 2020, March 2020, when we had the first lockdown, we at that time we didn't realize what this would look like until here we are now. Back in 2020, I was thinking around how do we support our whānau to get through this phase of COVID. Now, here we are having to look at, well, how do we live with COVID? So what does that look like in terms of supporting rangatahi leadership? So I would really encourage people once again to have a look at that Māori COVID impact report. And, that report is something that we felt would be instrumental in supporting what the future may look like in terms of supporting our rangatahi. So there's some really key insights in that report, evaluation feedback. We've got some narratives, local narratives, very developmental evaluation, and I would encourage people to have a look at that and think about, well, here is a snippet, captured insight of at that time. How can we leverage off some of those insights around supporting what rangatahi leadership might look like, or supporting rangatahi to step into leadership roles? So, yeah.
Amazing. And thanks again, Vicky, for all that wonderful work you've done with the Rōpu. It's really inspiring to see all the work that's come out of that. I do have a question that's come through, and maybe Penny, I was wondering about your thoughts on this, and then whoever else, and then I would love to talk a little bit more about food, if that's okay. And but we've got a question from Augustine, who says, my thoughts are that the communities we had back in the 70s and 80s are no longer. We have a very strong rent community, which means that people are not in the same place for more than a year or two. Do any of our panelists have a thought or a kaupapa that may address this issue? Or how can we collaborate to see our people still having a kind of inclusive program that not only wraps around them, but maybe even would follow up if they moved to another city? So has anyone got any thoughts about that? Penny, I don't know if you've got any things that you might want to...
Yeah, just really, really quickly, such an astute point to raise, because there's this kind of presumption that people who rent are going to be, moving around a lot and not wanting to connect with communities. And I think as we face more and more people who are absolutely held out of, ever owning homes, it's going to be an increasing issue. So not only is it bringing people who, rent in communities easily into feeling part of communities, it's, acknowledging that we are under huge housing stress. So, looking at the work that Megan and Cathy, Vicky, the Healthy Families teams do, it's about placemaking and connecting people to place, regardless of whether they're, living there short term or longer term. Because unless we give people a place to be and a place to stand and a place to feel connected to, everything else we do remains kind of fleeting. So, connecting people in who rent, absolutely, that's where we need to put a lot of our energy and focus, and particularly in South Auckland and West Auckland, because we have a large and increasing number of people renting.
Penny, you're also on the board of Kāinga Order, hey?
Yeah.
So is there any kind of new lessons that are coming through from them that they've seen about kind of building community at that level, even if people may not be there for that long?
Yeah, sort of two things. So number one is trying to build houses as fast as we can, so we've actually got people living in houses or having houses that they can rent, number one. Number two is trying to kind of, as kāinga ora, to colour outside of the lines that we would normally, as Old Housing New Zealand, it is just all about us and our tenants. But for kāinga ora, it's about creating good communities and helping fund and make sure that when we have large developments in communities, that they also look at how they connect with the other houses and community around them. It's a real challenge, and this is, again, for us as a well-connected community out west, we're going to have to put our arms around our kāinga ora, our state house tenancies, and basically work out how to connect people better.
I also wonder, Karel, if you must have had some experience with people who come in and maybe aren't that connected into this, extremely integrated community, or perhaps are there people who maybe don't want to be a part of it, or how do you kind of bring people in and like, say, if someone moves to your area or something like that?
Yeah, it is difficult at times, but things like our local board supported community days where people get together and have dinner together in somebody's place, that or somewhere in the community, that helps build and draw people in together. And that was one of the things I mentioned to you earlier about on the resilience side, is that those of us who've lived out here for a long time have grown used to coping with things like extended power cuts and so on, whereas those who've only recently moved in have no experience of that, and they need to be helped with that sort of knowledge of how to be resilient themselves in those kind of situations. But those community board supported, our local board, supported community dinners and stuff have been really good out here.
That's amazing. Yeah. So I guess just kind of weary of time, and I would still like to hear kind of from the people who haven't really spoken. So why don't we, the name of this project is called Brave New World. So what about if we go around and we think about maybe one or two kind of solutions that you think could either be implemented at a national or a government or a community level, or some kind of funding, or it could even be some kind of radical change that we need to push for, because we're all aware that we live in a society which has a lot of kind of entrenched problems, and some of the fixes are require quite major drastic changes. So you can take that however you want, but maybe Megan, will start with you in terms of it'd be great if you could talk a bit about the food area. So some solutions you'd like to see for a brave new world.
Oh, absolutely. I go straight out to the ether, to wide, and the first thing that needs to happen is that capitalism needs to be destroyed. It's a bad idea and it's done nothing but harm. And the second solution that I would love to see in New Zealand is the living wage for everyone, because without it, and right now people who are on benefits are in negative, they're in debt every week. They can't meet their material needs. And if you can't meet your material needs, then you have no headspace, you have no heart space for engaging in the world, because being in poverty is a full-time job. So I would love to see that.
Okay, amazing.
And then we would have more energy for looking after each other.
Just out of interest, if you had a third, would you say urban farms or?
Well, actually, yeah, but I would prefer it. Urban farms would be much easier to enact if our bylaws and our legislation was more enabling of them, which right now they're not.
Okay, interesting. Cool. Thank you so much, Megan. Karel, you're next to Megan on my screen. So let's hear from you next.
I guess to me the most important thing is what Penny said, is connecting people to place, and you know, sense of place is important, and but there are huge challenges at the moment, particularly with the divisions around COVID and so on. That, you know, let's not beat about the bush. That is a huge barrier to implementing community-wide solutions when people are such poles apart, and some people seem to be really violent in their reactions and their thoughts, and instead of looking at each other through an empathic lens, they're looking with hostility, and that creates a real barrier to anything we really want to achieve, to develop a brave new world. And that's something, you know, that's the elephant in the room we have to try and work around. And to me, you know, some empathic way of communicating is got to be a driver behind this.
So, okay, we've got end capitalism, nonviolent communication. Let's see what else we got here. Penny, do you want to give us some thoughts?
I'm well up for those, particularly the end capitalism. So, and I'll add to it, fundamentally change the democratic system. So democracy is fundamentally broken, to be honest. I think the way that we elect people and what passes for democracy at the moment is just completely, you know, due for a remake. So by going right back to localism, participatory democracy, changing the kind of leadership away from that, you know, left, right, good, bad, binary, you know, process, I think that's where we're going to bring our rangatahi into leadership. We're going to bring a different flavour to the kind of people who lead us, and that's when that brave new world can be made a reality, really.
I guess the key thing for me when I hear that is like, you know, localism, local democracy, local participation, it all requires time, and often people are not resourced for their time, which means that, you know, stuff can happen in a well-resourced community, but otherwise it's people who are in the grind and who don't have much space or capacity. So, I mean, is it also about resourcing that kind of stuff?
I think some of it is. I'll push back a little bit, and a little bit like Karel, you know, I mean, we are, it's easy to look back at Waitakere as sort of the golden age, and, you know, it was not perfect. We were a bit shambolic, and I think there was a whole lot of stuff that we probably didn't do particularly well. But we were kind of kind, and people got involved and they gave a damn. And one of the most active communities where some of the most awesome stuff happened was Rānui. And I think, you know, Rānui would hardly leap out at you as the most resourced community. But when people feel connected, when they can see each other in the work that's happening, when they can see value, then I think people get connected. So absolutely, let's fund the connectors, let's fund the bridge builders, let's fund the innovators and the entrepreneurs who are going to make that stuff happen in community. But mostly community will get up and do if they see that there's hope in it, and if they feel involved, and if it reflects what they're about.
And are you able to really succinctly answer, or see if you can have a crack at this question, and then any of the other people who we come to as well? But we've had a comment about lack of Māori Pacific leadership in upcoming local board elections, and how might we accelerate? So maybe one kind of thought on that would be good.
Two quick things: get behind your Māori or Pacific candidates and back them. There's been a fundamental lack of backing for Māori and Pacific members who've stood. Secondly, get out there and have a go.
Amazing, thank you for that. Okay, Fred, let's go to you now. What your solutions would be for a brave new world, and I've also got one question specifically for you after that, when you've once that's gone.
Yeah, there's a saying, whakamanatia kia hangaitahi ki te whakahautaka, which means empowered to build transformation together. So that's why it's easy for me to buy into the Vision West story, because it's about the transformation of people's lives, whether it's homeless or whether it's aged care, or the young person just needing a job or a learning opportunity. So I think we kind of understand what the barriers are, you know, but understanding the barriers are they the barriers that prevents us from empowering each other? You know, that's why I love the word whakamanatia, empowering each other to build transformation together. So what does transformation for Waitakere look like for our communities and so forth? And regardless of the barriers, regardless of the issues, and you know, so that would be my thing. And I know that's quite broad, but I think that works for me and the work that I do at Vision West and the university.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks, Fred. And just quickly, a question about, are there any courses that teach people about financial literacy, e.g. budgeting, or helping people put in a plan to becoming financially free or stable at Vision West?
Yeah, there are, but it's also different kinds of courses too. There's courses of how to start having to build your own personal economy. You know, so you could, and I know that that there are some courses out there that are designed even for those in social housing, for tenants as well. So yes, there are. But I will say probably the best training really is to get to a financial mentor as well. There's no better training than someone to take your journey with you in your story, or if you know people that need financial mentors and they're out there. Vision West has those and other organizations as well. So,
Henderson Budgeting Service, for example. So depending on where you're based, yeah, you can check them out and they're usually free. Okay, thanks, Fred. All right, Cathy and then Vicky. So Cathy, what are your solutions for a brave new world? Can be about food or can be about anything else?
Yeah, for me, it's an overall coming back from our rangi realm and back down into our papa realm. I feel like there's so much we live up in this and all of this hinengaro state, and we forget about just actually really being really down to earth. And so, you know, I think of that just as a broad thing, if we can actually just switch. And so I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and he was worrying about AI and on this sort of whakaro. And I was like, really, dude, at the end of the day, what's going to matter is whether we've got, you know, an aparo we can pull off the tree and have a bite. Like, these are the most essential things, and we need to get back to essentials. And so just actually, people have spoken to this, but, you know, Fred talking about empowering, for me, I want to see the living model of a Māori health centre. And I mean, you know, our rongoa practitioners, our mirimiri, the way that we can actually look after someone to be fully invested in and be given all the resourcing that we see our mainstream hospital systems have. And you know, really, let's go there. Let's stop talking and theorizing. Let's see the living examples. We can only move forward knowingly if we are living the example. So that's my big one. And then the other one is to tautoko what Megan's saying around, you know, it's all about economy. If we don't change the way we think about economies and understand that, you know, humans and the value that they bring into an economy, just being alive and being human, that's not about outcome of monetary, but switching our whole model. So capitalism out, you know, what other economic models can we come up with? Let's get creative, you know, local economies, circular economies, all of this stuff. But again, let's do it, not keep talking about it.
Nice one. And hey, lucky last to our special guest, Vicky. Have you got any thoughts about what it would take to create this brave new world?
Well, hey, I wasn't going to go there, but I think systemic racism is rife. So how do we change some of those systems that really don't provide the opportunity for you know, for Māori in particular to flourish. I mean, here's an example of, you know, what's happening in terms of influencing our system. Here's Matariki on the 24th of June, 2022. There will be a national acknowledgement throughout New Zealand for the next 30 odd years. How many more opportunities can, like Matariki, be provided for Māori to see themselves in a Te Ao Māori worldview kaupapa at a national level? So how do we provide that opportunity to influence a system that may not necessarily be supporting our Māori whānau to flourish? How do we have more matariki kaupapa or other kaupapa from our Te Ao Māori worldview perspective that provides Māori to participate? You know, what does manaakitanga look like? What does rangatiratanga look like? What does whanaungatanga look like? Give Māori the faith to do what we know works well for our people. So, you know, how do we break down those barriers? How do we use our spheres of influence in our own little spaces to look at or to have the courage to agitate or influence something that may not necessarily be sitting right with you? How do we have more collective discussions around kaupapa that we know as a collective we can influence? Have a big voice. How do we influence policy? How do we encourage our whānau to want to step on a local board to represent our whānau? So, you know, it's the current climate around what's happening is, you know, it'd be interesting to see what this might look like in a year or 2 years' time. But, you know, strength-based, matariki, having a kaupapa such as that is a good start. So how do we have more of those kaupapa where our whānau can see themselves in a system which may not necessarily be working for them at the moment, but what is it that we can influence individually, but then also as a collective to ensure our whānau communities flourish. So kia ora.
Kia ora, Vicky. And also, I guess the Brave New World for Pākehā allies could start at the Christmas table when people make racist comments, and you know, it's about us all learning to be good treaty partners. So yeah, let's all take the time to do that work over the summer holidays when you're around your whānau. So that's gonna, I think we're gonna draw to a close because it's 8 o'clock now. So I just want to acknowledge each and every one of you for the people at home, and also especially our panelists for giving up an hour and a half on an extremely busy week. It's been really, really inspiring and really interesting to hear all your kaupapa, and I've definitely kind of got a few little seeds that have been planted in my brain. And as I said, we'll make the video available and be sending that out so people can share it around. But yeah, again, I just want to acknowledge you all and thank you so much for coming. Thank you to everyone at home, and thank you to our panelists for all the amazing work that you do in your communities and all the inspiring work that you do and continue to do, because it's people like you out west who are, you know, going to be a big part of this Brave New World. So I would just like to hand over to Matua Fred to close us off. And before I do that, I'm just going to put that, I think I've already put it in actually, but if you want to have a look at the website, there's just 4 stories, but there's kind of discussions about whether there might be some more, and you can see all the videos, etc. there. But yeah, we will call it a night, and thank you all for coming.
Karo tātou before I do, te reti bi ati a koe Sophie. Mo te whakahariti ka tēnei huinga ipurangi. Thank you for facilitating this online kōrero, online hui, and also getting the voices of everyone as well. Ko te rete mihi ati ki a koe. I want to leave this with you, Sophie. He ao hou toa. That means a brave new world. He ao
hou
hou toa.
toa. Ai, pai.
So there you
Kia
go.
ora.
So on that, a very Merry Christmas to you all. Happy holidays to you all. And thank you also for just the awesome work that you're doing in our communities in all of your roles. Nō reira, e te whānau, kia ino i tata. E hone re kora ki te atua e mau ngāru ki te whānau whakaro pai ki ngā tākuta katoa. E te atu karawa whakawhitai anō ki a koe. Mo te putanga mai o ngā pakaro, po te tiaki a mātou ngāhere, mo te whenua hāpuri ngā tangata katoa hākoa ko wai, hākoa no whea. Tore i tukana nei mātou. Tēnei kōrero, pai tēnei kōrero, hirihira ki a koe, ko koe ta matakai whakora makatona atu. Amen.
Amen.
Kia ora whanau.
Kia ora whanau. Pō Māori, have a good night, everyone. Hei kona.